I was painting her living room when the roller slipped, left a pale streak across the corner of the window frame. She noticed before I did. "Too much pressure," she said, her voice calm but precise, like someone who spent years measuring words before letting them go. It was the kind of house that made you slow down. Everything was warm wood and muted color, a lived-in quiet. The kind of quiet that made you aware of your breathing. I'd been there 3 mornings in a row, patching, priming, painting. She never hovered, but somehow I always knew when she was in the room. She'd walk in with coffee, set it on the nearest surface, then linger just long enough to make me self-conscious. I told myself it was nothing, just a client making sure the job was done right. But the air between us kept changing, like the room's temperature adjusted itself when she spoke. She wasn't young, not in the way people mean when they say it like a compliment. She had something steadier, a quiet alertness. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, wisps escaping near her temple. She wore paint-stained jeans, barefoot, toenails unpolished. Every detail made it harder to pretend I didn't notice her. "Do you ever get tired of painting the same colors?" she asked one afternoon, standing by the open window. "Depends who I'm painting for," I said, too quickly. Her mouth curved, not a smile exactly, more like she'd heard something she wasn't supposed to. "That sounds dangerous," she murmured. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just too long. She looked at me for a second longer than polite, then turned back to her coffee. I went back to rolling the wall, pretending not to feel that look between my shoulder blades. She had a way of speaking like she didn't need a reply. Sometimes she'd talk about small things, the smell of rain, her neighbor's dog, the way paint changed shade when it dried. I never knew if she wanted conversation or just company. Still, I found myself answering anyway. That day, the light coming through the window hit her hair, and something inside me paused. She noticed, I think. There was a flicker, amusement, maybe curiosity, before she broke eye contact and moved past me, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of turpentine and jasmine. I told myself to focus on the job, on the edges, the trim, anything but the sound of her moving behind me. But it was impossible not to feel it, that strange awareness of space, of proximity. She reached past me to adjust a drop cloth, her wrist brushing my arm for half a second. It wasn't even intentional, but it was enough. "Sorry," she said softly. "It's fine," I said, and it was too fine. When she stepped back, she leaned against the freshly painted wall, didn't notice until it was too late. The wet paint left a pale mark on her sweater. I turned, half laughing. "You'll have to fire me for that." She looked down at the smudge, then at me. "Maybe I'll just make you fix it." Her tone was light, but something in it stayed. A pulse, buried under the casual. Later, when I packed up for the day, she stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching. "You missed a spot," she said, though she didn't point to where. I nodded, even though I knew every inch was perfect. That night, I kept seeing that look, the one she gave before turning away. The kind that made me forget the color on the walls, the smell of paint, the job itself. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't the room I wanted to finish. It was the silence we'd started to paint between us. The next time I saw her, the paint had dried, but something between us hadn't. She called me back to help with the shelves, said they looked uneven, though I knew they weren't. I came anyway. The room was different now, less chaotic. The smell of paint had faded, replaced by something softer, brewed coffee, old wood, faint perfume. She was sitting on the floor when I arrived, sorting through a small box of old books. A candle burned nearby, though it was still daylight. "You didn't have to come so soon," she said without looking up. "I didn't mind," I replied. And I didn't. She handed me a screwdriver, her fingers brushing mine for a second too long. No apology this time, just a quiet exhale. There was a small tremor in her hands as she passed it. Not much, barely there. But I noticed. "Rough morning?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She gave a short laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You could say that. I'm getting used to silence again. It's louder than I remembered." I didn't ask what she meant, but the words stayed with me, hung in the air between the dust motes. We worked side by side, adjusting the brackets, leveling each shelf. She moved slowly, deliberate in every gesture. the way she measured, the way she frowned at the crooked lines. But underneath it, I could feel something fraying. At one point, she sat back against the wall, brushing hair from her face. "I used to do this kind of thing with my husband," she said, so quietly I almost missed it. "He'd always insist on getting it wrong first." Then she laughed again, softer this time, but it broke halfway through, the sound catching in her throat. I looked at her then, really looked. The curve of her neck, the way she hid tiredness behind that small, precise smile. Her eyes, gray, restless, lingered on the half-finished shelf as if it was safer than meeting mine. "You miss him?" I asked before I could stop myself. She turned to me, finally meeting my gaze. Sometimes I miss who I thought he was." The silence after that was heavy. I didn't know what to do with my hands. So I tightened a screw that didn't need tightening. When she stood, she came close, closer than she had to. I could feel the warmth from her skin, see the faint streak of dried paint still near her shoulder from last time. She noticed me looking and smiled, small, almost weary. "You're very careful," she said. I didn't know what she meant, but I nodded anyway. "Don't be," she added, and walked toward the kitchen. Her footsteps faded, and the sound of running water followed. I stood there a while, staring at the shelf we'd built together, straight, balanced, unshakable, and thought about her hands, trembling for just a second, like the world she was holding might fall apart if she let go. When she came back, she handed me a mug of coffee. Her fingers brushed mine again, intentional this time. And in that quiet, something shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just a gentle pull, the kind that doesn't stop when you walk away. It was raining when I came by again. Not the kind of rain that made you hurry, the slow kind, the kind that fills the world with sound but leaves you thinking too clearly. She'd texted earlier. "If you're not busy, could you help me move the table?" The table was fine. We both knew that. When I arrived, she was barefoot again, sleeves rolled up, hair damp around her face. The air smelled like coffee and wet wood. A record played somewhere in the background, a jazz tune, low and lazy, as if the room itself was trying to stay calm. "I can't tell if this is crooked," she said, stepping back from the table. "It's fine," I told her, standing beside her to look. Our shoulders nearly touched. "Maybe a little to the left," she murmured, and placed her hand on the table's edge, her other brushing my arm by accident. Or maybe not. Neither of us moved. The rain thickened outside. I could hear it hitting the windows, steady, relentless. She sighed, a soft, tired sound, then turned away and poured 2 glasses of wine. "Seems like a waste not to open it," she said. I hesitated, then took the glass. "You're my boss, remember?" She gave a faint smile. "For another hour, maybe." We sat at the table, the one that wasn't crooked, and said nothing for a while. The silence was strange, not awkward, not easy, just full. Then she said, almost to herself, "I don't usually let people in my house." I looked up. "Why not?" Her thumb traced the rim of her glass. "Because they tend to stay, even when they're gone." I didn't know how to respond, so I said the wrong thing. "You make it sound like that's your fault." Her eyes flicked to mine, quick, sharp. "Maybe it is." A gust of wind rattled the window. She looked away. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, but then her phone buzzed on the counter. A man's name lit up on the screen. She didn't move to answer, just stared at it until it stopped. When she looked back at me, there was something new in her expression, not sadness exactly, but the space left after it. "Do you ever feel like you're standing too close to something you shouldn't touch?" she asked quietly. "Every time I come here," I said before I could think better of it. That earned me a small laugh, dry, real. She leaned back, resting her elbow on the chair, and her foot brushed against mine beneath the table. It could have been accidental, but the air between us changed, like a spark without sound. Her gaze lingered on me just long enough for everything else to fade. The rain, the music, the room itself. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, the power flickered, lights went out, record stopped, everything swallowed by dark. I could hear her breathing, close enough to feel. "Stay still," she whispered. I did. In the faint glow from outside, her face was inches from mine, eyes soft, unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might close the distance. But then she stood, slow, careful, breaking the spell. I should find candles, she said, voice low. And before I could say anything, she was gone, leaving the sound of rain and the echo of everything that almost happened. The storm had passed, but the quiet it left behind felt heavier. The next morning, I came to check the power. An excuse, maybe, but she didn't question it. She was in the kitchen, barefoot again, holding a mug that had gone cold. The light through the window caught the side of her face, soft and pale. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from thinking too much. You didn't have to come, she said. I know. That was all. But she didn't ask me to leave. I moved through the living room, flipping a few switches, pretending to test outlets. Everything worked fine. I just needed to stay a little longer. When I turned back, she was watching me. Not shyly, directly, like she was trying to read something she hadn't decided if she wanted to know. You always look like you're about to say something, she said. I set the screwdriver down. Maybe I am. And I don't know if I should. Her eyes softened, almost pitying. That's the thing about should. It keeps people polite. For a moment, the sound of the fridge hum was the only thing between us. Then she said quietly, What are we doing, really? I didn't answer right away. I didn't have an answer. There was paint still on the baseboards from weeks ago, half hidden behind the couch. A reminder of when this was simpler. I come here, I said finally, and I tell myself it's just work. But then you say something small, and it doesn't feel like work anymore. Her jaw tightened. You're too young to complicate your life like this. You say that like you're not part of it. That hit something. She looked away, ran a hand through her hair. I'm not sure I remember how to do this right anymore. Do what? Be looked at. The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to reach for her, but she stood so still it felt like touching her would break something. You don't have to keep pretending this means nothing, I said, barely audible. And what if I don't pretend? She whispered. Then what? You start believing there's a version of this that ends well. Her voice didn't crack, but something inside it did. I stepped closer, not close enough to touch, just enough to feel the pull between us. I don't care how it ends. That's because you haven't lived through the middle yet, she said, almost to herself. We stood there, the distance between us crowded with everything unsaid. She stared at me, long, steady, unblinking. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Small, sad, beautiful. You think this is about you wanting me, she said. It's not. My breath caught. Then what is it? Her eyes glistened, not with tears, just light. It's about me remembering what it felt like to be wanted. And in that single sentence, she ruined me. Quietly, completely, without ever touching me. She called me that Sunday, the kind of message that sounded casual but wasn't. If you're around, I could use help with something small. When I arrived, she wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. The house felt dimmer than usual, like the air itself was holding its breath. I found her in the study, kneeling by an open drawer. Old photographs and papers were scattered across the floor. She looked up when I stepped in, not surprised, just tired. I was cleaning, she said, though it sounded more like an apology. She handed me a small wooden box. Can you open this? The latch is stuck. I crouched beside her, the scent of dust and cedar filling the space between us. When the box finally gave, she didn't look inside right away, just stared at it, lips pressed tight. Inside were letters, yellowed, edges curling, tied with a faded ribbon. She ran her thumb across them, as if testing whether they were still real. He wrote every week for 2 years, she said quietly. I waited. He was in another country. We said we'd wait. Then one day, the letters stopped. Her voice didn't waver, but her hand did. I found out later he'd met someone else. Got married. Had kids. The usual kind of happy ending. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. She smiled then, a fragile, almost amused expression. You look like you're afraid to breathe. I just don't want to break the moment, I said. It's already broken, she replied, folding one letter back into the box. Has been for years. I wanted to ask why she'd kept them, but she answered before I could. Because sometimes you need proof that someone once meant it, even if they didn't mean it long enough. She stood and brushed the dust from her jeans, then crossed to the window. You remind me of him sometimes. That sentence felt like gravity shifting. I tried to laugh it off. That's not necessarily a compliment. No, she said. It's not. Her reflection in the glass looked distant, softened by the fading afternoon light. He used to look at me the way you do, like I was still possible. My throat went dry. And you're not. She turned then, slowly, meeting my eyes. No one stays possible forever. We stood there, the silence almost unbearable. She reached for the box again, then hesitated. Her fingers brushed mine when she handed it back. Take it, she said. What? What? Because if I keep it, I'll keep waiting for something that already ended. I opened my mouth to refuse, but she shook her head, gentle, final. I took the box. It felt heavier than it should have, like holding someone else's unfinished sentence. When I looked up, she was watching me again, expression unreadable. Don't look at me like that, she whispered. Like what? Like you're about to start meaning it. And just like that, I realized the real shift wasn't her letting go of the past. It was her warning me not to become it. The next time I saw her, the box was gone. The shelves we filled, the walls finished, everything looked complete, except for the air between us. She opened the door before I knocked. You left your brush, she said, holding it out like proof that I had an excuse to return. I don't think I did, I said, but I took it anyway. The living room was quiet, lit only by the late afternoon sun. She'd moved the furniture again. The couch now faced the window. It looked like a room waiting for someone to stay. I thought about what you said, she murmured. I said too much. No, she said softly. You said enough. For a while, we didn't move. The silence wasn't the same kind as before, not full of tension or restraint. It was tired, honest. The kind that comes after pretending for too long. I didn't mean to make you carry my past, she said. You didn't ask for that. I didn't mind, I told her. I just didn't know what it meant. She smiled faintly. Neither did I. There was something fragile in the air, like we'd both reached the end of something unnamed. I thought maybe if I kept everything neat, painted over the cracks, she trailed off, shaking her head. But they always show through eventually. I moved closer, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. Her hand rested on the back of the couch, fingers curling slightly, as if she was holding herself still. You don't have to fix me, she said. I'm not trying to. Then what are you doing? Staying, I said. Just staying. Her eyes met mine, steady, unguarded. The kind of look that asks and answers at the same time. For the first time, I didn't feel like she was measuring the distance between us. There was no hesitation, no test. Just quiet understanding. The kind that grows when two people stop trying to protect themselves from it. She stepped forward until we were close enough to share a breath. Not touching, but close enough that every movement mattered. You shouldn't, she whispered. I already did. Her laughter was small, almost a sigh. Then, finally, she reached out, fingertips brushing my wrist, tracing the line of paint still there from weeks ago. You never cleaned it off, she said. Didn't want to. For a long moment, we stood there, saying nothing. The sound of traffic outside drifted in faintly. Life still happening, somewhere else. When she leaned her forehead against mine, it wasn't a kiss, wasn't even a promise. Just the quiet collapse of everything we'd been holding apart. No grand words. No declarations. Just breath shared between two people who had run out of ways to pretend. The room felt smaller, softer, like it had finally exhaled. And in that stillness, with her hand resting against mine, I understood. Some things don't begin with touch. They begin with the silence you're finally brave enough to keep. It's been months since I last stood in that living room. The paint's probably dry by now. Maybe she's moved the furniture again. Maybe not. But sometimes, when I pass a hardware store or catch the scent of turpentine, it all comes back. The quiet, the pauses, the way light moved across her face like it had something to say. I don't see her anymore. That was her choice, and maybe mine too, in a quieter way. We never ended things. There was nothing to end. Just a moment that had done what it came to do. What we built wasn't love, not exactly. It was something smaller and stranger, a space where two people could stop pretending they weren't lonely. She gave me stillness. I gave her attention. Maybe that's what connection really is, not a story that lasts, but one that changes you just enough to notice what you've been missing. I used to think intimacy meant closeness. Now I know it can live in distance, in the things you don't say, the hands you almost touch, the glances that hover just long enough to leave a mark. The day I packed my tools for the last time, she walked me to the door. No long speech, no thank you. Just a faint smile, and a single line that's been echoing in me ever since. "You made this place feel lived in again," she said. I didn't answer. I just nodded and left, and when the door closed, it sounded final, but not cruel. Like the ending of a song you didn't realize you'd been humming along to. Sometimes I wonder if she kept the brush I left behind, or if she ever looks at the wall where my handprint might still show faintly under the paint. I hope she does, not as a memory of me, but as proof that something unspoken can still leave color behind. And me? I learned that love doesn't always arrive to stay. Sometimes it visits quietly, fixes a room, leaves a mess you don't mind cleaning up. Sometimes it teaches you what you were ready to give, and who you were ready to see. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but I know this. She taught me the difference between wanting someone and witnessing them. And if you've ever had someone look at you like they finally see you, you know how rare that is. So yeah, maybe I was just painting her living room. But for a while, we were both trying to repaint something else, something inside ourselves that had long since faded. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?